No reference to any people called Muslims, no reference to any religion called Islam, no reference to any man named Muhammad, no reference to any book called the Quran, and no reference to any city called Mecca.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I've stumbled across this video where Jay Smith is presenting archaeological evidence that's going to blow your mind. He's examining actual 7th century coins from across what was supposedly the Islamic Empire, and what he finds is absolutely shocking. These coins have Christian crosses all over them, but here's what they don't have. No mention of Muslims, no mention of Islam, no mention of Muhammad, no mention of the Quran, and no mention of Mecca for decades after Muhammad's supposed death. He's not just speculating here, he's holding physical evidence in his hands, coins you can examine today, and the absence of these fundamental elements raises some serious questions about how and when Islam as we know it actually developed. So make sure you watch until the end, because this archaeological approach is going to challenge everything you thought you knew about early Islamic history. And please comment down below where you're watching from. I really love to see people from all over the world connecting in here. Alright, now let's get into the video.
Conclusion, there is no reference to the name Muhammad on this document, no reference to this prophet being a Muslim, or belong to the religion Islam, or any reference to the city of Mecca, nor of his book, the Quran. He could be almost anybody. Of Islam, according to what David's telling me, that would have been controlled by the time of Muawiyah. And that's, I understand it, I would agree. Muawiyah is historical. And so therefore, from Tripoli all the way over to Afghanistan, that would have been under his control, which is an enormous amount of land. So therefore, somewhere amongst all that area, that's the brown and the orange, there should be some reference to Muhammad somewhere, right? One reference to Muhammad and I would be satisfied. By the time of 680, we're talking about 50 years after Muhammad. Where is David able to show me one reference to this man named Muhammad that he's talking about? In that area, that swath of land from Afghanistan to Tripoli, let's start with the Quran. Well, okay, let's look at the Quran. 4 references to Muhammad in the Quran. In chapter 3, verse 144, in chapter 33, verse 40, in chapter 47, verse 2, in chapter 48, verse 29. Take a look and see what the Muhammad is. The Muhammad there, really, the name Muhammad means the Blessed One. If you look and you understand that, Murad, who is a scholar in both Arabic, he's on our team, he's the one that's working for us from the Middle East. He has been saying, he's watching right now, he has been saying, look at the Arabic there. It's from Nabatean Aramaic. Did I not say that earlier, that this is Nabatean Aramaic Arabic? And when you look at that, it just talks about the Blessed One is no more than a messenger. In every case, when you look at those 4 references, this could be Abdul Malik himself, referring to himself, not to a man named Muhammad. Let's take a look at the Dome of the Rock, because that was also constructed by Abdul Malik. Look at the inscriptions, the only original part of the buildings. There is reference, I don't have time to go into, but almost every time when you look at the Shahada there, you can see that this is referring to a messianic figure, and it's more likely than not, it is confronting the Byzantine Christianity that is there in Jerusalem. That's why it's built there. That's why it's built looking up and down onto this, the Church of the Sepulchre. It's a one-upmanship by Abdul Malik, who's way up in Damascus. I don't have time to unpack that, but what I really want to go to are probably the most substantial authority that we're looking at today, and that is the coins. Let's look at the coins, because the coins that are coming out, and this is all stuff that has come out this year in 2020. Look at that swath of land and look and see what they now controlled. Anytime you have a new emperor or a new caliph like Abu Bakr, Umar, or Uthman or Ali, the first thing any caliph or any king or any leader does is to mint coins. And they put their image on the coins, and they put their name on the coins, and they explain who they are, and they always say what the religion is, and they always say where the mint is. Look at the coins. This is evidence from the 7th century. Now look and see where they're minted. They're minted in 2 areas, one in Syria, the other in Iran. None of them are in the Hijaz. Too far north again. Am I getting kind of boring saying the same thing over again? Everything we see happening in the 7th century comes from the north, not from the south, not from Mecca, not from Medina. When you look at the coins, you can follow a sequence on the coins. This would take me an hour to go through all the sequence. What we do know, start on the left. Those are Arab coins. It's not that they weren't minting coins. They were minting coins. Look what's on the coins. These leaders, these Arab leaders, had crosses in their hands. They had crosses above their heads. Why would you be wearing a cross if you're a Muslim? No reference to Muhammad in any of these. No reference to Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, or Ali.
This section presents one of J. Smith's most significant archaeological challenges to traditional Islamic historiography. He poses a straightforward question. Somewhere amongst all that area that's the brown and the orange, there should be some reference to Muhammad somewhere, right? One reference to Muhammad, and I will be satisfied by the time of 680. From a historical methodology perspective, this is a reasonable request. We're discussing an empire that, according to traditional Islamic sources, stretched from Afghanistan to Tripoli by 680 CE, approximately 50 years after Muhammad's death, according to those same sources. Jay is asking for just one contemporary reference anywhere in that territory. From an archaeological standpoint, if Islam functioned as described in later Islamic sources, we would expect substantial physical evidence, inscriptions, documents, and monuments from the period. Jay then examines the Quran itself, finding 4 references to the word Muhammad. He raises an interesting linguistic point. The word Muhammad in Arabic means the praised one or the blessed one. It could function as a title rather than exclusively as a proper name. This creates interpretive challenges when trying to identify specific historical individuals in early texts. The archaeological evidence Jay presents focuses on 7th century coinage, physical objects that can be examined today. He highlights something historians have noted. These leaders, these Arab leaders, had crosses in their hands. They had crosses above their heads. Why would you be wearing a cross if you're a Muslim? This is where the evidence becomes particularly interesting for historians. The Arab leaders who conquered this territory are minting coins with Christian symbols, crosses on their heads and in their hands. From an archaeological perspective, this suggests that whatever religious traditions these 7th century Arab conquerors followed may have been significantly different from Islam as it developed in later centuries. Jay then notes, no reference to Muhammad or any of these. No reference to Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, or Ali. The 4 Rashidun caliphs who Muslims traditionally believe ruled after Muhammad, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali, don't appear on contemporary coins, inscriptions, or documentation from the period. The historical narrative we have today comes primarily from sources written 150 to 200 years after these events by authors who didn't witness them firsthand.
When you get to Muawiyah, finally Muawiyah in 661, he would be the first caliph from the Umayyad Caliphate. Take a look at his coins in the West. The coins in the West are gold soliduses and they're copper coins. He himself has a cross on his head and he's holding a cross in his hand. He's a Muslim? No reference to any people called Muslims, no reference to any religion called Islam, no reference to any man named Muhammad, no reference to any book called the Quran, and no reference to any city called Mecca. It is just blank on all these coins. Now, the coins are great because they are from the 7th century. They do not disintegrate. They do not deteriorate. We can look at them today, and we have not been looking at them until this year. Boy, I could go a whole time on coins because if you want to see what is the first Muslim coin, you've got to start with 692. That golden coin you see there, that's Abdul Malik. He is the first one to introduce Muhammad. He is the first one to introduce Shahada. And then he puts his own image on the coin in 693 because Justinian II goes to war with him because he dares to do something that's different than the Byzantines want, proving that the influence is coming from Christianity in the West. But look what's on the backside of all the coins coming out of Iran. Look at Muawiyah's coin, all the way up from 661 up to 680. On the backside of the silver coins in the East are Zoroastrian fire altars. Nothing to do with Muhammad. Take a look and you'll see. Who is the man we're looking at? Now, I'm just going to introduce him today. I don't have the time because I say I only have 5 minutes. I've really got to zip through this because I'm only halfway through my slides. Iyas ibn Qabisa of Tayyiye. This is the Muhammad of the 7th century.
The evidence regarding Muawiyah, traditionally identified as the first Umayyad Caliph ruling from 661 CE, presents additional historical puzzles. Jay observes, he himself has a cross on his head, and he's holding a cross in his hand. He's a Muslim? This raises methodological questions for historians. If Islam existed in the 7th century as a fully formed religion with distinct practices and theology, why would the Caliph himself promote Christian imagery on official currency? One historical explanation assumption could be continuity with Byzantine administrative practices, but it does create questions about the religious identity of these early rulers. Jay provides a systematic summary of what's absent from the archaeological record. No reference to any people called Muslims, no reference to any religion called Islam, no reference to any man named Muhammad, no reference to any book called the Quran, and no reference to any city called Mecca. From an evidentiary standpoint, these 5 foundational elements of Islam, Muslims, Islam, Muhammad, the Quran, and Mecca, don't appear on coins minted across the empire during this period. These are official government documents, and the elements we associate with Islam today are not present in the contemporary material evidence. Jay notes an important chronological point. That's Abdul Malik. He is the first one to introduce Muhammad. He is the first one to introduce, and then he puts his own image on the coin in 693. The first reference to Muhammad on coinage doesn't appear until 692 CE, approximately 60 years after the traditional date of Muhammad's death. Even then, given the meaning of the Arabic word, it's unclear whether this refers to a specific person or functions as a title. The regional variation in coinage is also significant. Jay points out, on the backside of the silver coins in the east are Zoroastrian fire altars. So in the western territories, we find Christian crosses. In the eastern territories, Zoroastrian symbols. Nowhere do we find distinctly Islamic imagery during this early period. This suggests the Arab conquerors may have been adopting or continuing the religious imagery of their conquered territories, rather than promoting a unified new religion.
Iyas ibn Qabisa of Tayayi. He comes from Hira. He comes from the Lak. He's a Lakhmid king. He was a king. He was not poor. When you look and see what we know about him, we now know that he was there in 618. He was the one that joined with the Arabs when Heraclius came and destroyed the Sassanians. 622 this happens. That's why the year 622 is so important. And he is the one that is credited with that, with them helping with the relationship. I don't have time to go and tell you about Iyas. That's for another time. But we're now looking at him. We're finding that this is the Muhammad of the 7th century. He's nothing like the Muhammad of the 9th century. A completely different man. He is a Christian to begin with. He was a Christian Muhammad. His name is Iyas ibn Qabisa. His nickname was Muhammad, and that was his name de guerre. Now, hold on to that. I don't have time to go into this. We'll come back to him. I've already said we can't find anything about the rightly guided caliphs. But now let's look at the rock inscriptions. The rock inscriptions are almost as good as the coins. We have found 30,000 rock inscriptions. And here's what's interesting. When you look at the rock inscriptions, you will see that none of them, before we get onto that, take a look and see where the rock inscriptions are. They're all up there in the north. They should be down in the bottom part where the Sabaic script is. All of these rock inscriptions from the 7th century up until 690 are all using Nabatean Aramaic, which is from Petra. Petra. Have I said that one before? And when you look and unpack those rock inscriptions, Ilka Lidstad, oh, you've got to give me more minutes than that. Ilka Lidstad, 100 dated rock inscription. Everything we see before 690, none of it referring to anything that we need to be looking. There's nothing there about Muhammad on any of these rock inscriptions. They're still there for us today. And then we get to the inscription of 741, the Apocalypse of Pseudo-Methodius Continuato Byzantia Arabica. That's a mouthful. Remember when Patricia Correa looked at this and said, this is the first reference we have for Mecca. We don't have any other reference for Mecca. What she didn't read is the rest of the inscription, because the rest of the inscription explains who and where this place was. And it places it way up in southern Turkey. The first Mecca is way up in southern Turkey. I don't have time to get into that. Wait till you see when we come back. I don't want to get into Petra. Petra is amazing. This will take me another hour.
Jay presents an alternative historical candidate for the 7th century figure behind the Muhammad narrative. He comes from Hira. He comes from the Lakhmids. He's a Lakhmid king. He was a king. He was not poor. He's referring to Iyad ibn Qabisa, whose biographical details differ significantly from the traditional Islamic narrative. Rather than being an orphaned merchant from Mecca, this historical figure was an educated king ruling from Hira in southern Iraq. This hypothesis would explain certain patterns in the evidence. Jay notes, take a look and see where the rock inscriptions are. They're all up there in the north. They should be down in the bottom part. Approximately 30,000 rock inscriptions from this period cluster in the north: Syria, Iraq, Iraq, Jordan, while the Hijaz region, where Mecca and Medina are located, has yielded virtually none. Even more intriguing is the geographic confusion in early sources. Jay mentions, Patricia Crone looked at this and said this is the first reference we have for Mecca. Patricia Crone, a respected scholar of early Islam, found that the earliest historical mention of Mecca places it in southern Turkey, hundreds of miles north of the site in Saudi Arabia identified as Mecca today. This geographic discrepancy raises questions about how the historical narrative developed. The trade route evidence adds another layer. Jay observes, notice where all the trade routes are. Not one of them goes south. They're all going east and west and north. If Mecca was the major trading center described in traditional Islamic sources, we would expect trade routes to pass through it. Instead, all documented commercial routes from the period flow east, west, and northward, bypassing the Hijaz region entirely. What we're examining here is the gap between later written narratives and earlier physical evidence. The traditional Islamic historical narrative was compiled primarily in Baghdad and Cairo during the 9th and 10th centuries, 150 to 300 years after the events described, by scholars working from oral traditions rather than contemporary documentation. Meanwhile, the archaeological evidence, coins, inscriptions, and trade routes, suggests a historical development centered in the north rather than southern Arabia. This represents an ongoing scholarly debate about early Islamic history and the reliability of different types of historical sources. It's a fascinating area of historical inquiry that continues to generate discussion among academics. What are your thoughts on this archaeological approach to early Islamic history? I'd love to hear your perspective in the comments. If you found this analysis interesting, please like and subscribe for more content examining historical evidence and scholarly debates.